Chicago's most feared mob boss got stopped by a waitress, not by cops, not by rivals, by a waitress. Alessandro Moretti was seconds away from smashing a man's face in at table 12 when Isabella Rossi grabbed his wrist and told him no. That should have gotten her killed. Instead, it made her unforgettable, because what looked like a random act of courage was actually the first move in a twisted game of obsession, blackmail, and revenge, and where the real bomb drops when she finds out her own brother's death may have been part of the trap all along.
Chicago's most feared man wasn't in some high-rise boardroom. He was nursing an espresso at table 12 of Lucia's Ristorante. His name was Alessandro Moretti, and his influence cast a longer shadow than the mayor's. The staff all knew the protocol. Eyes down, hands sure, and you never, under any circumstances, met his gaze. But Isabella Rossi was different. When a quiet, venomous threat from Moretti's table slithered through the restaurant, she didn't shrink away. She set down her tray, approached the table, and stared directly into the devil's eyes. "Sir," her voice was a sliver of ice, "we have a policy against that kind of language here. Don't test me, little girl." The restaurant didn't just fall silent, it held its breath. Lucia's Ristorante was a time capsule of old-world charm, nestled on Chicago's Orchard Street. It was a place of deep mahogany, starched white linens, and wine that cost more than a month's wages. For Isabella Bella Rossi, this place was a war zone. Night after night, she navigated the delicate ballet of wealthy clients, temperamental chefs, and the silent power struggles of the crew. She excelled at it. She was swift, precise, with a smile that could neutralize a grievance before it was ever spoken. But that smile was a shield, and behind it was a woman forged in the fires of pure desperation. Her existence was split into two clashing realities. At night, she delivered fine pasta and Barolo to patrons who wouldn't notice a lost $1,000. By day, she haunted the sterile corridors of St. Jude's Hospital, where her younger brother, Marco, battled an enigmatic sickness that defied diagnosis and exhausted their insurance. The experimental drugs, the out-of-network doctors, the endless co-payments. It was an insurmountable peak of debt, and she was scaling it all by herself. Marco was everything she had left. Their parents were just echoes in a framed photo on her worn-out dresser. She would do absolutely anything to keep him alive. That anything became a cold, heavy stone of conviction in her gut. This Tuesday night felt particularly suffocating, the humid air promising a storm. The dining room was unusually sparse, a condition that always set the staff on edge. A slow night meant the present customers felt they deserved an even greater share of devotion. The manager, Mr. Henderson, a man who seemed to live in a perpetual cringe, was anxiously polishing cutlery at the bar. "He's on his way." Chloe, another waitress and Bella's only real friend, breathed as she hurried past, her tray visibly shaking. Bella knew exactly who he was. The entire atmosphere of Lucia's would shift on its axis the moment Alessandro Moretti entered. The pressure would drop. The murmur of conversation would fade. Even the kitchen noise seemed to muffle itself. He was a legend in a Brioni suit. The news called him a reclusive investor or a shipping magnate. The streets, and everyone who survived on them, knew better. He was the head of the Moretti crime family, the puppeteer who pulled the city's underworld by its strings. He never bothered with reservations, he just materialized. And tonight, he had company. At his side was his constant shadow, Vincenzo Vinigallo, a man whose tailored suit failed to conceal the raw, brutish force of his build. A third man, whom Bella had never seen before, was with them. He was older, with slicked, silver hair and a nervous tremor that seemed to emanate from him. He had the look of a man on his final walk. They occupied table 12, the booth in the corner. It was squarely in Bella's section. "Bella, that one's yours," Henderson whispered, his gaze fixed on the floor. "Just fast and perfect." "I understand the procedure, Mr. Henderson," Bella replied, her tone empty. She picked up her notepad, inhaled a slow, steadying breath, and made her way over. "Good evening, gentlemen," she offered, her voice a study in polite neutrality. She aimed her gaze at a spot just above their heads, the practiced technique for serving their kind of clientele. Vinnie Gallo just grunted. The silver-haired man twitched. Alessandro Moretti, however, said nothing. Bella felt his stare on her. It wasn't the slimy look she endured from drunken stockbrokers. This was different. It was appraising, heavy, the way a predator surveys its territory. He was younger than she imagined for someone with his reputation, maybe in his mid-30s. His face was severe and handsome, with a powerful jaw and dark eyes that seemed to drink the light from the room. A fine white scar bisected his left eyebrow, the single flaw on an otherwise impeccable, hardened face. "Your usual Mr. Moretti?" she inquired, her eyes still locked on the distant wall. "My guest is ordering first." His voice emerged, a deep, smooth baritone with a whisper of an Italian accent. It sounded like silk being dragged over gravel. The silver-haired man, Salvatore Bianchi, she would soon discover, stammered out an order for a basic spaghetti without a starter. It was a meal for a child, a meal for a dead man walking. "And for you, Mr. Moretti?" "The bistecca, rare, and a bottle of the '08 Solaya. And get him," he motioned toward Bianchi, "a whiskey from the top shelf. The man looks like he could use it." "Of course, sir." She pivoted, every muscle in her shoulders tight, and retreated. She felt his stare follow her until she was safely behind the swinging doors of the kitchen. "He's watching you," Chloe hissed as she loaded a fresh tray. "He's looking through me," Bella corrected. This was never about the food. And she was right. The tension at table 12 was a palpable entity. It seemed to coil and swell with each passing second. When the food arrived, Bella served it with robotic precision. Bianchi's whiskey remained untouched. Moretti carved his steak with the focus of a surgeon, eating with a deliberate slowness, as if he commanded time itself. Their conversation was a low murmur. The deep rumble of Moretti's voice was punctuated by Bianchi's increasingly desperate whispers. Bella maintained her distance, polishing wine glasses at the service station, her every nerve strained. She was paid to be deaf to her patron's discussions, but this energy was impossible to shut out. It was the absolute calm of a predator just before the kill. She saw Bianchi push a white envelope across the mahogany. Moretti gave it no notice. He just kept eating. Then Bianchi's voice cracked, rising with raw desperation. "Please, Alex. It was a mistake. I didn't understand. I swear I didn't know." Moretti's voice cut through the air. It wasn't loud, but it carried a chill of such pure authority that a nearby couple physically flinched. "You knew the terms, Salvatore. You violated them. You assumed I wouldn't know." "It's all in there," Bianchi begged, his trembling hand nudging the envelope forward once more. "All of it, plus interest. Just walk away from this." At last Moretti stopped eating. He placed his silverware perfectly on the plate, then leaned forward. The candlelight caught the terrifying void in his eyes. "Walk away," he repeated, his voice deceptively soft. "You laid your hands on what was mine. You stole from my family. Now you offer me cash and tell me to walk away?" Alex, I'm begging you. You, Moretti began, his voice dropping to a fatal whisper that still reached every corner of the room, are vermin, and you know what I do to vermin. He lifted his heavy crystal water glass. Bianchi's eyes shot wide with sheer terror. He scrambled to his feet, sending his chair crashing backward with a loud clatter. No, please! The sound of the falling chair ripped through the now deathly quiet dining room. Everyone was paralyzed. Mr. Henderson was gone, probably locked in his office. Chloe was frozen behind a support column. Bella watched as Moretti's hand, holding that glass, remained steady. He was going to do it. Right here, in front of everyone, he was going to shatter that glass on the man's face. He would ruin this man, tarnish the restaurant's name, and Bella would lose her job. And without her job, Marco, the cold stone of conviction in her gut became a shard of ice. She didn't reason. She simply acted. Bella moved with a swiftness that startled even herself. The polishing cloth fell from her hand as she covered the 10 feet to table 12 in 3 purposeful strides. Her hand shot out, her fingers wrapping around Alessandro Moretti's wrist. It felt like gripping solid marble. The contact sent a jolt through her. His skin was hot. The muscles beneath it were coiled steel, his bones immovable. His hand, gripping the heavy tumbler, was stopped inches from its destination. A complete, deafening silence fell over the room. The only noise was the gentle tinkling of the chandelier swaying in the draught. Vinnie Gallo was already half standing, his hand reaching inside his coat, his face a portrait of violent disbelief. Salvatore Bianchi was ashen, trapped in a half-risen posture, but Bella saw only Alessandro Moretti. He turned his head with unnerving slowness. His dark eyes found hers. There was no rage there, not yet. There was only a deep, cold, and boundless shock. It was the look of an emperor who'd just been struck by a commoner. The look of a god questioned by a mere mortal. He didn't utter a word. He just stared. His gaze dropped to her hand on his wrist, her plain working hand with its short nails and the small, pale burn scar on one knuckle. Then his eyes returned to her face. Bella's heart was a wild drum beating against her ribs, threatening to break free. The rush of adrenaline sharpened her senses, bringing every detail of his face into sharp relief. The dark stubble on his jaw, the faint lines near his eyes, the dark ring circling his iris. She was acutely aware that this was the most foolish, life-altering mistake she had ever made. This man could have her life ended before she drew her next breath. He could ruin everything. He could take Marco from her. But her mind was filled with the image of Marco's pale face on a hospital pillow and the mountain of red-stamped overdue notices on her counter at home. This job was all she had, and she would not surrender it to this man, this brute, regardless of his wealth or his power. "Sir," she began, her voice a tremor held in check by ice. "That kind of language is not permitted here." The scarred flesh of Moretti's left eyebrow twitched upward. He remained a statue of coiled violence. Bella's own grip tightened. A ridiculous tableau played out before her. A 120-pound waitress defying the city's most formidable man. But she would not yield. "You're frightening the other guests. My colleagues are terrified, and you're about to get me fired." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a raw, private whisper meant only for him. "I don't care who you think you are, and I don't care what he—" Her gaze flickered toward Bianchi. "Did to earn your wrath. You will not settle it in here. Don't test me." Those last words hung in the charged air, a current of defiance that shocked the room into silence. "Don't test me," she repeated, a warning. Finally, Vinnie Gallo spoke. "Take your filthy hand off him," he snarled, his own hand emerging from his jacket, gripping the cold, dark steel of a gun. "Vinnie," Moretti uttered. The word was soft, yet it carried the weight of an unbreakable law. Vinnie froze, his fingers welded to the pistol. Alessandro Moretti then gave all of his focus, all of his world back to Bella. His eyes conducted a slow inventory of her face. He saw her eyes, a defiant mix of hazel and terror, holding something else he could not place. He saw her mouth, a hard, unyielding line of resolve. He could see the fear, the frantic pulse beating in the delicate skin of her throat, yet she refused to break. Her hand remained a vice on his wrist, its pressure unrelenting. He had been threatened by men with blades and guns. He had been cursed by his enemies and begged by politicians. But never in all his years had a waitress told him no. He had never been warned. A corner of his mouth pulled back. It was not a smile. It was something far more dangerous. It was interest. With slow, deliberate grace, his fingers uncurled. The heavy crystal glass slid from his grip. Bella, braced for a violent response, held fast. The glass fell the 2 inches to the table, its impact muffled by the thick linen. A heavy, final thud. It did not shatter. Only then did she snatch her hand back from his wrist, as if from a flame. Moretti very slowly rubbed the flesh where her fingers had left their mark. He glanced at Bianchi, still whimpering. "Leave," he commanded, his voice devoid of emotion. "Get out, Salvatore, before my mood sours, and take your interest payment." His fingers flicked at the envelope. "It is insultingly small." Bianchi scrambled for the envelope and his chair, nearly tripping over himself in his haste to obey. He fled the restaurant, forgetting his coat, the door slamming behind him like a gunshot in the ringing void. Moretti's attention returned to Bella. The other patrons resumed their conversations in frantic, hushed tones. Mr. Henderson peered from the kitchen, his face a pale mask of fear. Bella stood her ground, fists clenched. She had won, or she had just sealed her fate. The distinction was impossibly fine. Moretti reached inside his coat. A tiny, uncontrollable flinch was her only response. He paused, cataloging her reaction. It was not a weapon he sought. He produced a thick black wallet and drew out a sheaf of $100 bills, too many to count easily. He set them on the table, a small fortune that dwarfed the cost of the wine and his meal. Then he rose. He was a tall man, over 6 feet, and his shadow fell over her. Bella tilted her head back, refusing to give an inch of ground. He smoothed the cuffs of his suit. "The steak was superb, Isabella," he murmured. A chill coursed through Bella's veins. He knew her name. Of course, the tag was on her uniform, but his pronunciation of Isabella turned it into a shared secret, or perhaps a death sentence. He and Vinnie strode toward the exit. Vinnie cast a look of pure poison over his shoulder, a silent vow of retribution. Moretti, however, never looked back. He departed, and the small bell over the door chimed softly, a mocking little sound in the crushing silence. The moment the door shut, Bella's legs gave way. She caught the edge of a booth, her body trembling as the adrenaline tide receded, leaving her cold and sick. "Bella, oh my God," Chloe whispered, rushing to her side. "What have you done? That's Alessandro Moretti." "I know who he is," Bella breathed, her gaze fixed on the pile of currency. It was more than a month's wages, enough for Marco's next treatment. "You are dismissed," Mr. Henderson scurried from the kitchen, his voice a frantic squeak. "You cannot speak to a customer that way. Not that man. Rossi, you are fired." Bella faced him, her terror momentarily consumed by a sharp, cold rage. "You were cowering in the kitchen, Mr. Henderson. He was about to attack a man. He was about to destroy your restaurant. I protected this place, and he settled his account." She gestured to the money. Henderson's eyes darted from the cash to Bella to the door. He was a man trapped between two different kinds of fear. "Just clear the table," he stammered, his authority utterly shattered. "And do not ever do that again." He then hurried away. Bella began to clear the plates, her hands shaking so badly they rattled against the porcelain. She had met the lion in his own den. She had provoked the beast. And as she gathered the bills, a terrible feeling bloomed in her gut. The beast was not angry. He was curious, and that was a fate infinitely worse. The days that followed were a suffocating fog of anxiety. Bella existed on high alert, startled by every sudden sound, every car that idled on her street. She came to work expecting termination, but Mr. Henderson merely looked away. She walked home, anticipating a shadow in a dark alley, but her trip from the bus was always quiet, filled with ordinary city noises. Nothing occurred, and that was the terror. The silence from Moretti's world was more menacing than any threat. It was a serpent, coiled and waiting. Her stand at table 12 became a house legend. The staff whispered her nickname, La Leonessa, the lioness, when she couldn't hear. Chloe watched her with a blend of reverence and fear. "I can't believe you're not dead," she would say, while topping off salt shakers. "Neither can I," Bella would answer, her voice strained. She kept all the money from table 12. It was a little more than $2,000. With it, she funded Marco's next series of experimental injections at St. Jude's. The guilt of using that tainted money was washed away by the profound relief of seeing the invoice stamped, "Paid." When she saw him, she wore her most convincing smile. "How was work, Bells?" he'd ask, his voice thin, his smile still luminous in a face of hollowed cheeks and hopeful eyes. "Busy, Marco. Good. A very generous customer came by." She stroked his hair, her heart an aching weight. "You just worry about getting better. I have the rest." "You're the best, Bells. What would I do?" "Shh. You don't have to think about that," she said, the smile feeling like a mask. "I've got you." The lie felt like ash on her tongue. She had nothing. She was suspended by a single fragile thread, and she knew Alessandro Moretti was the one holding the shears. 1 week later, on a Thursday, he came back. The dining room was full. Bella was balancing a heavy tray of food when she felt it, a sudden shift in the room's atmosphere. She looked up. He was at the host's stand. He was by himself. No Vinny, no guards, just him, dressed in a charcoal suit that was worth more than her car. The hostess, a young student named Sophie, was visibly shaking. "Mr. Moretti, a pleasure," Mr. Henderson said, rushing up with fluttering hands. "A table for you, sir. Our very best, right this way." "No." Moretti's voice sliced through Henderson's nervous chatter. His gaze bypassed the manager, sweeping the room until it found her. His eyes locked with Bella's, and the faintest hint of a smile graced his lips. "I will wait for her section." The tray in Bella's hands suddenly felt as if it were made of lead. He wanted her. Table 12 was taken by a family celebrating. The only spot in her area was a small table for two by the wall. "Of course," Henderson sputtered. "Table 9. Isabella, Mr. Moretti is at table 9. Bella gave a curt nod, her face a serene, professional mask. She served her entrees, took a bracing breath in the kitchen, then walked back into the fray. He was already seated, one leg elegantly crossed over the other, perusing the wine list like any other patron. As she drew near, he glanced up. Isabella, he said, his voice a low, resonant hum. It is good to see you again. I am pleased Mr. Henderson saw fit to retain you. He knew Henderson had tried to fire her. He knew it all. Good evening, Mr. Moretti. She managed her notepad ready. May I start you with a drink? A 97 Brunello, and your suggestion for the main course. He was baiting her. This was his game. She could have suggested the priciest dish, but she understood that was never the point. The osso buco is exceptional this evening, she stated, her voice even. It was braised by the chef for a full 8 hours. Then the osso buco it is. Of course. Turning away, she felt his stare, traced the path she took. For the next 2 hours, he was her sole responsibility. He played the part of a model patron, civil, silent, and complimentary of the cuisine. From his coat, he produced a small leather-bound book and read. Yet he was always watching. With every pass of his table, she could feel his attention on her. It wasn't lustful. It was proprietary. It was the same way he had stared down Salvatore Bianchi just before he had menaced him. It was the look of a man who had found something he intended to possess. He was studying her, attempting to understand her very essence. He savored the quiet, anxious current he sent not only through her, but the entire dining room. Once he was done, she presented the bill. His wine was nearly untouched. Is there anything further, sir? He glanced up from the book. Yes, I have a question. Why did you intervene? Bella froze. Intervene with what, sir? You know precisely what. At table 12, you put your life and your employment on the line. For what reason? To shield a weakling like Bianchi? For the establishment's policy? Bella met his gaze directly. The fear remained, but now a spark of defiance burned alongside it. I did it for myself, Mr. Moretti. You were creating a disturbance in my workplace. Your actions were about to cost me my tips for the night, and possibly my position. My job means a great deal to me. Important, he echoed, tapping the book's cover with a long finger. On account of your brother, Marco, the one at St. Jude's. The blood in Bella's veins turned to ice. Her notepad slipped from her grasp, striking the floor with a clatter. She made no move to retrieve it. How could you know that? She whispered, her voice trembling with a fresh wave of dread. It is my affair to know many things, Isabella, he replied gently. I know he suffers from a rare autoimmune disease. I know his treatments cost $24,000 per cycle. And I know you work 2 jobs, this place and data entry on your days off, just to manage it. I am also aware that you're still falling short. He knew. He possessed her deepest, most guarded secret. This was no mere game. It was an autopsy of her life. He had cut her open and was peering at her very soul. What is it you want? She asked, her voice raw. I want to comprehend, he said, leaning closer. You have more to lose than anyone else here, and still you were the one who challenged me. You placed your hand on my arm. You told me no. It has been a very, very long time since I was told no by someone who wasn't immediately silenced. You are either a woman of incredible courage or incredible foolishness. I'm just desperate, she confessed, the word tearing from her throat. And desperation changes a person. Yes, he agreed. his gaze darkening with an empathy that frightened her more than his rage. "Indeed it does." He rose, leaving a shockingly large sum of cash on the table. He stopped beside her, so near she could detect the subtle, costly fragrance of his cologne. It was something like sandalwood and bergamot. "This world is an unforgiving place, Isabella," he murmured, his voice too low for anyone else to catch. "It has no mercy for lone lionesses. In the end, the hyenas always come." He departed. Bella stood paralyzed for a full minute, her heart hammering out a panicked, wild beat. He hadn't just made a threat. He had stripped her bare. In no uncertain terms, he had demonstrated his reach into every facet of her existence, from her employment to her brother's sickbed. The mental assault had commenced. He had no intention of killing her. He intended to dismantle her piece by piece. He returned 2 nights later, and the night following, consistently alone and seated in her section. He would order new dishes, drink fine wine, and peruse his book. And he would observe. Not another personal word was spoken between them. He simply watched. The other staff members now dreaded her part of the restaurant. Patrons gave her table, his table, a wide berth. Bella felt like a creature in an exhibit, put on display for the entertainment of a single man. Her tips from the other patrons began to shrink. People were scared to be close to her, to be connected to her, as though she carried a plague. Moretti naturally always paid extravagantly, his gratuity making up for the loss. But it wasn't about the money. It was about forging a chain. He was cutting her off. He was shrinking her world until he was the only one left inside it. The flimsy framework of Bella's life started to collapse 2 weeks after her initial meeting with Alessandro Moretti. The illness she had told everyone about, the one she had even made herself believe was the core issue, was revealed to be a tragically simple fabrication. She got to street, Jude's on a brilliant Wednesday morning, a coffee in hand, prepared to sit by Marco's side for his session. Instead, Dr. Lena Hansen, a compassionate yet resolute woman who managed Marco's case, met her in the lobby. "Isabella, could we speak in my office?" Dr. Hansen asked, her expression grave. A chilling premonition washed through Bella. "Is he doing poorly?" "Physically, Marco is fine. He has been released." "Released? What do you mean? His appointment is today." "No, Isabella, it isn't," Dr. Hansen replied, ushering her into a small, sterile room. "He has been non-cooperative for weeks. He checks in for his appointments and then departs. He hasn't had an injection in nearly a month." Bella's entire reality seemed to shift. "What? That can't be right. I paid for it. Where is he?" "That is the other issue." Dr. Hansen paused before sliding a crumpled slip of paper across her desk. It was from a check-cashing establishment on the west side. "A nurse happened to see this, Isabella. Marco is not suffering from an autoimmune disorder. We conducted a new full panel last month. He is anemic and malnourished. But the symptoms he has been faking are from withdrawal. We think he has a serious gambling problem." The words were nonsensical. Gambling? No, not Marco. He's unwell. "He is unwell," Dr. Hansen affirmed softly. "But his sickness is addiction. He fabricated the symptoms to get money from you. The story about experimental treatments was a lie. He has been taking your earnings and gambling them away." Bella just stared at the slip. The color drained from her face, leaving only a cold numbness. The thousands of dollars, the extra shifts, the unending gnawing fear, it was all built on a falsehood. She left the hospital in a complete haze with no destination in mind. She ended up at their shared, dilapidated apartment. He was present. The apartment was a wreck, littered with takeout boxes and soiled laundry. Marco sat on the couch, trembling, his eyes wide with terror. Bella, I can explain everything. You lied to me, she whispered, the numbness yielding to a cold, hollow fury. This entire time, the hospital, the procedures, every bit of it. I got in too deep, Bells, he sobbed, tears flowing freely down his cheeks. It began small, only a few dollars, but then I started losing. I kept trying to win it back and lost even more. I took the money, I admit it. I just had to break even. I was going to give it all back. Give it back? With what money, Marco? She screamed, the sound tearing from her lungs. I've been working myself to death. I stood up to him for you. I know, but Bella, they're going to harm me. Who? Who's going to harm you? The man I'm indebted to. He's no banker. I owe him $50,000, Bella. He said I have until tonight. If I don't pay, he'll break my legs or worse. $50,000? The figure was so absurd it was almost laughable. It was a death warrant. Who is it, Marco? Who? A loan shark. He's employed by a man named Bianchi. Bella's heart seized. Bianchi? Salvatore Bianchi? The man from the restaurant? The man Moretti humiliated? Everything clicked into place with a sickening certainty. Marco hadn't just fallen into debt. He had trespassed into the territory of a rival crime family. And Moretti had known. The hyenas come, he had warned her. It wasn't a threat he was making, it was a prophecy. He knew of Marco's addiction. He knew who held the debt. He had been waiting for this exact moment. Stay right here, she commanded, her voice eerily calm. Do not move. Don't open the door for anyone. I will handle this. She fled the apartment, her thoughts racing. She was penniless, with no way out. There was only one man in this city who could solve this, one man at the very center of this tangled web. She didn't even have his address. She went to the one place she was sure of. She ran the 2 miles to Lucia's, storming through the entrance, her hair a mess, her face ashen. Her shift was hours away. Where is he? She demanded of Mr. Henderson. Who? Miss Rosie. You're not Moretti. Alessandro Moretti. How do I find him? I don't know, I promise. You are lying. Bella, Chloe's voice interrupted. What is happening? He knows. He knew all along. He was toying with me. She was half sobbing, half shrieking. I have to find him. She rushed back out to the street, frantic. She had no plan. She stood on the sidewalk, struggling to breathe as the city itself seemed to press in on her. A long, dark sedan, a Maserati Quattroporte, glided to a quiet stop directly before her. The rear window descended. Alessandro Moretti was watching her, his face a mask. Get in the car, Isabella, he commanded, his tone as casual as if he were asking for the time. She did not pause. She pulled open the heavy door and sank into the plush leather upholstery. The car carried his scent, sandalwood, and wealth. It pulled from the curb with a smooth motion. You knew, she accused, her voice shaking with rage. You knew about Marco. You knew of his addiction, of the debt he owed Bianchi. You just sat there every night, watching me, waiting for this exact moment. I did, he conceded, his eyes tracing the blur of the city outside. You allowed this to happen. You had the power to prevent it. Prevent it? He faced her then, his gaze alight with a cold fire. Bianchi is a competitor. Your brother was foolish enough to borrow from him. That was his affair, not mine, until it touched you. And now I am touched. They will end him, and it will be on your hands. It will be on his. Moretti corrected, his tone cutting. His failing, his deceit. He let a beat pass. But you are not a failure, and you do not deceive. The vehicle turned onto a private, gated road that led toward an immense, fortress-like estate on the water's edge. "What is it you require of me?" she murmured, the defiance seeping from her, leaving only a cold, dense dread. He observed her for a long, quiet moment. $50,000, that is what he owes. I can make it vanish. He snapped his fingers. Just so, I can contact Bianchi. I can assume your brother's liability, and I can guarantee his continued existence. "And what is the price?" she asked, already certain the answer would be devastating. The car glided to a stop before the house. He shifted his entire frame to meet her gaze. "I am a collector, Isabella. I gather rare things, art, automobiles, people, and I consider you singularly rare. You are defiant. You possess a loyalty for those who are undeserving, and you do not fear me, not truly. I am petrified of you." "No," he countered, the ghost of a smile on his lips. "You are petrified of what I am, of failing your brother. You are not petrified of me. You demonstrated that. I desire that. I desire that resilience. I desire that devotion." "What do you want me to do?" "You will begin working for me," he stated, "not as a server. You will become my personal aide. You will reside here. You will oversee my public schedules, my meetings, my holdings. You will remain by my side. You will witness my world. In exchange, your brother's debt is eliminated. He'll be given a place in the nation's finest rehabilitation facility. He'll be secure, he'll be sober, and you will belong to me." It was not a query, it was a declaration of ownership. "A gilded prison," Bella breathed, her eyes on the opulent, fortress-like manor. "A prison is a prison," he acknowledged. "But from this one, the whole world is visible, and you will be shielded. No more wolves, only the lion." She pictured Marco, trembling on the sofa. She pictured Bianchi's enforcers, men who would shatter bones like they were twigs. She pictured the crushing weight of lies and impossible debt. Alessandro Moretti had waited for her life to crumble. Now he was the only one offering a way to piece it back together, though molded into his own dark design. "Do we have an agreement, Isabella Rossi?" he inquired. She stared at this lethal, calculating, and undeniably captivating man. She was left with no options. She never had any. He had been maneuvering chess pieces while she was merely playing checkers. "Yes," she uttered, her voice empty. "We have an agreement. We have a—" Her transition from the old life to the new was savagely quick. Alessandro Moretti moved with the sort of precision that secures victory in wars. Within 1 hour of her consent, 2 events unfolded in parallel. Vinnie Gallo was sent to settle Marco's debt with Salvatore Bianchi, a settlement Bella knew would involve threats, not currency. And 2 of Moretti's silent, tailored men appeared at her apartment to retrieve Marco. She was granted 5 minutes for her farewell. "Bella, where are they taking me? What is going on?" Marco was panicked, his eyes wide as the imposing men stood emotionless in the doorway. "You're going to a clinic, a very good one, up in Vermont," Bella replied, her voice flat, emotionless. She was hollow. "You're going to get sober, Marco. This is your one shot." "But the money, the debt?" "It's been settled," she stated. "How?" "Bella, what have you done?" He seized her arm, his clutch surprisingly firm. "You went to see him, didn't you? Moretti! Bella, no, you can't do this." I had to, she said, wrenching her arm free. You gave me no other way. Now leave. Get well. That is the only way you can ever repay me. She watched as they guided him away. No tears came. Only a deep, resonant emptiness filled her. She had rescued her brother, but in doing so had lost herself. She took a single bag. Her flat, with its fractured plaster and view of a brick wall, already seemed like a relic from a former life. The black Maserati was waiting below. She entered, and it carried her back to the Moretti grounds. The estate was not a home. It was a declaration. A sprawling, modern Gothic bastion of dark glass and gray stone that loomed over the turbulent, churning waters of Lake Michigan. Inside it was a gallery of frigid opulence, black marble floors, immense vacant rooms, priceless contemporary art, and windows that framed a tempestuous sky. It was exquisite, sterile, and completely devoid of a soul. She was assigned a suite of rooms in a separate wing, larger than her entire former apartment, with a king-sized bed, a walk-in wardrobe already filled with clothing in her size, and a bathroom reminiscent of a Roman spa. It was a cage fashioned from silk and stone. Her first day passed in a haze of introductions. She met Mrs. Petrova, the severe Eastern European housekeeper who managed the estate with a silent, iron will and regarded Bella with clear distrust. She was provided a laptop, a new phone, and a pile of documents. You will manage my public-facing affairs, Alessandro clarified, seated opposite her in his huge, minimalist office. The space was controlled by a polished ebony desk and one enormous window that looked out onto the lake. The board meetings for Moretti Global Logistics, the charity events, my reservations, my travel. You will act as the barrier between myself and the legitimate world. And the illegitimate one? She asked, her voice soft. His lips twitched. Vinny manages that. You will have no part in it. Your hands will stay clean. This is a term of the arrangement. I am meticulous about keeping my worlds distinct. But they were not distinct. They bled one into the other. The men who visited the estate for logistics meetings had the same hardened gazes and poor-fitting suits as Vinnie Gallo. The charity functions were intricate showcases of influence, where politicians and magistrates would laugh and clasp Moretti's hand, their own smiles taut with strain. Bella soon understood her role was not merely to schedule, but to watch, to exist as his shadow. She excelled at it. Her sharp intellect, sharpened by the bedlam of the restaurant, adjusted with ease. She learned to foresee his requirements, to decipher the micro-expressions of his associates, to sense when to speak and when to become invisible. And then there was Sofia Carbone. Sofia was the child of Silvio Carbone, an old-school capo from New York, and she had been, as Vinny bluntly stated, circling Alessandro for years. She was breathtaking, with hair like jet, eyes of emerald green, and a collection of sharp, dangerously stylish outfits. She moved through the Moretti estate as if it were her own, and she looked upon Bella as something less than human. Alessandro Caro, Sofia cooed, striding into his office without notice one afternoon as Bella reviewed quarterly numbers with him. Sofia paid Bella no mind, moving behind the desk to lean over Alessandro's shoulders, her hand gliding down his chest. You have been dodging my calls. I believed we had plans for the opera. I have been occupied, Sofia, Alessandro replied, his focus fixed on the report. His posture was rigid. He did not welcome her touch. Occupied with her? Sofia finally bothered to look at Bella, her emerald eyes dripping venom. Your little server, your stray. Does she not reek of bleach and cheap marinara? Bella's back went rigid, but she kept her eyes on her screen. Isabella is my assistant, and she is considerably more capable than your last three, Alessandro stated, his voice frigid. He gently but decisively lifted Sophia's hand away. We can speak about the opera later. Isabella and I are working. The dismissal was unmistakable. Sophia's face hardened, her painted mouth thinning into a tight line. She gave Bella a look of pure, undiluted loathing. It was a vow of future hostilities. Of course, Kara, business first, she purred, but her gaze was ice. She swayed out of the room, her hips a pendulum. You ought to be wary of her, Bella said, shattering the quiet. Sophia is a little girl in a grown-up's costume, Alessandro replied, waving her away. She's a viper, with her father's influence behind her, Bella countered, startled by her own directness. Alessandro glanced at her, that familiar glimmer of curiosity in his stare. You perceive that, do you? Good. She is a possible nuisance, but one I will manage. Now, regarding the shipping terminal agreements. He was transforming her. Bella felt it. The dread she once carried was giving way to a cold, hard sense of pragmatism. She was starting to think as he did, to see the angles, to identify the dangers. The closeness was the most perilous aspect of all. They spent long hours together, frequently working deep into the night. She saw him not only as the crime lord, but as the man. She saw his frustration, his weariness, and on very rare occasions, his thoughtfulness. He would discover her in the library late, engrossed in a book, and they would converse, not about his work, but about literature, the city, anything at all except their true selves. A simmering, unspoken current flowed between them, a perilous magnetism that Bella resisted with every ounce of her will. He was her jailer. He was the man who had ensnared her, yet he was also the man who valued her mind, respected her counsel, and in his own fashion kept her safe. He'd never touched her improperly, nor had he ever spoken a crude word. Their pact was for her allegiance, not her submission, yet the desire between them was a heavy, charged presence in every room. One evening, a tempest battered the lake, making the great windows tremble. They were in his study, finalizing a logistics plan for Milan. You no longer fear me, do you? He murmured, watching the amber whiskey swirl in his glass. I've grown accustomed to you, Bella replied, shutting her laptop. That's not the same thing. And your hatred for me, Isabella? For this bargain you were forced into? She met his gaze, this man who had so methodically and cruelly dismantled her life. I despise the way you did it. I despise that you preyed on my brother's failings to ensnare me. I despise all of this, she said, motioning to the lavish surroundings. But do you despise me? He insisted, his stare unwavering. Bella paused. I don't know what I feel, Alessandro. My world has shrunk to simply getting through the day. You are a monster. I am not blind to that. I've read the files you thought I wouldn't see. I know what Vinny is capable of in your service. I have never pretended otherwise, he conceded. But, she added, her voice softening, you rescued Marco. He's in treatment, he's protected. He phones me each Sunday, sounding stronger. You accomplished that. The monster did. How am I supposed to truly hate you? Nothing is that clear. He rose and moved to the window, watching lightning cleave the dark water. Clarity doesn't exist in my world, Isabella. Only layers of shadow. You are beginning to see that. He faced her again. You should get some rest. Your morning starts early. She agreed with a nod, collecting her belongings. At the doorway, his voice anchored her. Isabella, she pivoted. You are the only soul in this house who speaks the truth to me, the only one with the courage for it. Never lose that. She held his stare for a beat, this powerful, isolated, dreadful man framed by the storm. Without a word, she departed, the soft click of the door echoing behind her, leaving her with the unnerving thought that her gilded prison was starting to feel like the only safe harbor she had. Bella adapted to her new reality with a chilling efficiency. She orchestrated Alessandro's public affairs, but her lifeline was the weekly call with Marco. His recovery was the single ray of light that made her gilded prison tolerable. Yet one of those calls planted a toxic seed of suspicion. Marco mused on how the loan shark had materialized, as if by design. It was like he knew I was at my breaking point, he'd said. That suspicion took root and grew. When Alessandro departed for a 2-day trip to Milan, Bella recognized her chance. The silence of the house was her cover. An urgent need for the truth propelled her toward his private, biometrically sealed office. A forbidden space. Her pulse throbbed in her ears. She had kept the whiskey glass from the night of the storm, a relic she'd held onto with a strange compulsion. With a handkerchief, she delicately lifted his latent print from the crystal and applied it to the scanner. The lock disengaged with a quiet snick. Inside were his personal file cabinets. She'd observed him enough to know he kept the key concealed in a false-bottomed humidor. She located the drawer marked Bianchi, and within it, a slender folder bearing her own family name. Rossi. What she found inside left her breathless. There were surveillance shots of her pilfered personnel file, but 2 items were the most damning. First, a payment order from a common thug to Vinnie Gallo for watching and making contact with Marco. And second, a brief, handwritten message from Vinnie to Alessandro, sent before she had ever approached him. Boss, it stated, the asset is primed. Bianchi's operative, Post, engaged the brother. He's swallowing the hook. He'll be drowning in debt within a month. Bianchi will assume it was his own play. He gets his leverage, and you get her. Her reality fractured. This wasn't bad luck. It was a blueprint. They had engineered her despair, feeding her brother to a rival to forge a debt so immense that only Alessandro could resolve it. As cold fury began to displace her shock, she heard the front door open. Alessandro had returned ahead of schedule. She surged from the office to face him, the note clutched in her hand. You deceived me, she yelled, her voice raw. He gets his leverage, and you get her. Does that phrase sound familiar? Alessandro's expression became stone. He offered no denial. You were in my study. You constructed this prison before I even knew I was a captive, she accused, rage-filled tears carving paths down her cheeks. You destroyed my brother just to possess me. He attempted to reason, his voice a low rumble. The scheme was Vinnie's. I merely told him I needed an opening. A way to bring you here, under my protection. He chose a sledgehammer. And you allowed it, she sobbed. Before she could continue, his secure phone buzzed. He took the call, his posture instantly rigid. What? Where is he? I am on my way. He ended the call, his face a chilling mask of lethal intent. That was Vinnie. Bianchi discovered the ruse. He assumes you were part of it. He's retaliated. He's collected on the debt. What are you saying? He's taken Marco from the clinic. The call had been from Vinnie. Bianchi had uncovered the trap and, believing Bella was complicit, had abducted Marco. Bianchi demanded a trade. Her for the brother, Alessandro's answer was absolute. I do not bargain with my people. He and Vinny readied themselves for a confrontation at the Kenosha shipyard. Bella refused to be left behind. He is my brother. I am going. At the shipyard, she stayed in the car until the night was split by a single gunshot. She scrambled out into a deadly tableau. A sniper had Marco in his sights. No, she cried out. In the ensuing pandemonium, Alessandro threw himself in front of Marco, becoming a human shield as Vinny eliminated Bianchi. They escaped. In the getaway vehicle, Alessandro pressed 2 passports and a bank transfer confirmation into her hands. Fly to Italy, build a new life. It is the only means I have to ensure your safety. He was giving her freedom. At the private runway, a jet idling, Bella guided Marco up the aircraft steps. She was liberated. But then she paused, looked over her shoulder, back at Alessandro. Her decision remained suspended in the tense air. She stood on the tarmac, her brother secure, a new beginning just a few steps away. Yet Alessandro Moretti, the very monster who had forged her chains and then bled to break them, was watching her, waiting. He had granted her the one thing he'd sworn she'd never have: a choice, liberty or him. This chapter is anything but closed. What path would you choose? Would you vanish with the money, or would you turn back toward the devil you've come to know? This is the kind of impossible choice that can tear a soul in two. If you must find out what comes next, if the story of Isabella and Alessandro has taken hold of you, then the way forward is clear. Acknowledge it with a like. Share this with another soul who craves a story that defies easy answers. And most of all, subscribe and activate your notifications. We see every comment, so tell me which way you believe her heart pulled her. We wouldn't want to leave this story unfinished.
She thought she was protecting a table. That was the funniest part. Isabella Rossi believed she was stopping one violent moment inside one expensive restaurant on one unlucky night. But the second her hand clamped around Alessandro Moretti's wrist, the story stopped being about dinner, manners, and workplace rules. It turned into a full-blown Revenge World speedrun, the kind where every truth drops like a grenade and every act of courage comes with an invoice attached. Because let's be honest, in stories like this, the first person who looks like the villain is rarely the final boss. Alessandro was terrifying from the start, sure. He was rich, cold, calm, and powerful enough to make a room go silent without lifting his voice. But what made him dangerous was not the threat everybody could see. It was the patience nobody noticed. He did not crush Isabella after she defied him. He did not fire a warning shot. He did not publicly humiliate her. No, he got curious, and that right there was the red alert. The man who gets angry can be predicted. The man who gets interested is the one who changes a person's fate. And then the plot twist started sprinting. Her brother Marco, the boy she worked herself half to death to save, was not just sick in the way she believed, he was lying. The treatments she sacrificed everything for were built on deceit. He was burning her money on addiction and gambling debts while she was out here fighting lions with a silver tray and a tired smile. That alone would be enough to shatter someone, but then the story went completely feral. The debt was connected to Bianchi. Moretti knew, Moretti had known, and by the time Isabella understood the board, the chess game had been moving for weeks while she still thought she was playing checkers with fate. That is the life lesson hidden inside all the drama. A person's greatest enemy is not always the obvious threat. Sometimes the real danger is the one who studies weakness, waits for desperation to rip open the walls, and then walks in dressed as salvation. Isabella did not fall because she was foolish. She fell because she was exhausted, cornered, loyal, and trying to save someone she loved. In the real world, that is how many people get trapped, not through open violence, through precision, through timing, through help that arrives exactly when resistance becomes unaffordable. And that is why her story hit so hard. She did not sell herself for greed. She did not walk toward Moretti because she was dazzled by money or power. She moved because every door behind her was collapsing. Her brother's lies were poison. The debt was real. The threat was immediate. Moretti offered a solution with the kind of ease only a man with total control could offer. He made the impossible disappear. But when a person solves a crisis too smoothly, it raises the ugliest question of all. Did he fix the fire or did he light the match in the first place? That is where the lesson sharpens into something brutal. In life, relief is not proof of goodness. A person can rescue someone and still be the architect of her ruin. A cage does not stop being a cage just because the bars are polished. Protection does not become love simply because it feels safer than chaos. Isabella's tragedy is that Moretti gave her what the world refused to give: stability, resources, safety for Marco, and a place where the hyenas could not reach her. But he gave those things after the world had been carefully narrowed until he was the only remaining answer. That is why the story feels less like romance and more like a psychological ambush wearing a luxury suit. And still, the emotional damage does not stop there, because Moretti is not simple. He is not some one-note tyrant with zero humanity. That would make life easy, but stories that stay in the mind never give easy exits. He manipulates her, yes. He traps her, yes. He uses her desperation as leverage, absolutely. But he also watches her with genuine admiration. He protects Marco. He values her strength. He listens when she speaks truth to him in a world full of cowards and flatterers. Then in the end, he even offers her freedom. That contradiction is the deadliest part of all. Because now the lesson becomes even darker. People are not ruined only by pure evil. They are often ruined by mixed motives, by someone who is cruel and sincere at the same time, by someone who wants to possess but also protect, by someone who harms with one hand and steadies with the other. The human heart does not know what to do with that. It cannot hate cleanly, it cannot trust safely, it becomes trapped in emotional smoke, trying to breathe in a room full of contradictions. Isabella's story teaches that strength is not just the courage to fight the monster in public. Real strength is the ability to name control even when it arrives wrapped in care. She could stop a man from smashing a glass into another man's face. That took bravery, but the harder battle came later when the threat was no longer explosive. It was intimate, strategic, personal. It knew her brother's name, her finances, her grief, her duties, her loneliness. It knew exactly which pressure points to touch. That is how real-life traps often work. The manipulator does not need chains if he understands guilt. He does not need violence every day if he has already made himself indispensable. And the person caught inside it starts calling survival a deal, then a compromise, then complicated, until one day she realizes her whole life has been rearranged around the will of someone else. That is the deepest lesson here. Desperation can turn captivity into gratitude. And once gratitude enters the picture, escape becomes morally confusing. So yes, Isabella stood up to the devil, but the real tragedy is that surviving the devil did not mean defeating him. It meant entering his orbit. It meant living close enough to his power that safety itself began to feel like surrender. And that is why her story does not just entertain, it warns. It says that not every savior is innocent, not every protector is free of hunger, and not every rescue deserves trust. Sometimes the most dangerous man in the room is not the one making the loudest threat. It is the one who waits, watches, and makes sure that when she finally reaches for help, the only hand left is his.